So yes everyone, iPadOS 26 gave the iPad Pro and a bunch of other iPads a new superpower with better windowing, multitasking, a better file system, better mic audio management, but there's still a good amount of things that iPad Pros or any iPad can't do that macOS and MacBooks can do. And this video is going to kind of highlight all the things that are still missing from iPadOS 26 and why people would still gravitate towards something like macOS, a MacBook, or a Mac Pro. So without further ado, let's talk about all the missing things that iPadOS still does not give us. Let's get into it. So now before we jump into all these differences, I do want to mention that my iPad Pro with iPadOS 26 was an update that I've wanted for years, and my iPad is my official computer, my one and only, and my workhorse for everything, and the new multitasking and windowing system has made it exponentially better in making it a full laptop replacement. But there are still a multitude of things that make the iPad an iPad and really keep it restricted from all the other things that macOS can do. But I'm just making this video to let people know and make them aware of what's still missing, so if they do walk into an Apple store and they have to make a decision on $1,000 on what to spend, they know exactly what they're getting out of each one of these and what they're missing from macOS if they decide to go with an iPad as their one and only computer. So let's start off with some big ones, and again, not everybody uses these things, and I would probably say that maybe 5% of Mac users really touch on some of these things, but again, for those 5%, that is of the utmost importance, and that's why you gravitate towards macOS versus iPadOS. So the first one's going to be that there's still no terminal access with an iPad, iPadOS 26, or anything in between, making it very difficult for somebody who lives in terminal or command line to be able to jump over to an iPad as their main computer, because there's still no access, and I doubt there will be for a long time coming. And then also, just from a usability standpoint, maybe you have a laptop or a Mac that you share amongst other people, there's still no multi-user account functionality with iPad. So the iPad is going to be my iPad. When I sign into it, it's all of my information, my account, my profiles, my app store, all my Apple ID stuff. Versus on a Mac, you can actually have multiple profiles very simply and log in and out of them. So if you do have maybe kids, or maybe you live in a household that shares a laptop, you can easily do that and keep everything fully divided and still relatively private. iPads cannot do that. Yes, there are workarounds with focus modes, but still it's nowhere near the kind of division that you have with different profile systems on a macOS computer. And now let's talk about kind of desk setup support and what that looks like. So first and foremost, iPad Pros are limited to only one external display. You cannot have multiple external displays no matter how much you try, and this is how it's built, how it's going to be built, and I doubt they're going to end up giving us 2, 3, 4, or multi kind of external display support, because Apple still wants to keep the iPad in its silo. Yes, they brought it closer to macOS, and they're kind of bringing macOS closer to iPadOS in terms of UI and design, but they don't want to cannibalize any more than they already are by giving us multi-screen support on external monitor support, so we're still limited to one. And in that same light, there is no clamshell mode whatsoever. There is a workaround by putting your auto brightness to never turn off or auto locking to never turn off, but it's not true clamshell support. If you close your iPad or lock your iPad, the secondary display will completely shut off. There has been no workaround on any iPadOS version that I've seen. And then kind of in that same light, multi-desktop support. So if you are aware, with macOS, if you swipe with 3 or 4 fingers, I believe, there's different windowing systems for you to be able to categorize and organize your desktop views. That's not possible on iPadOS 26 or any iPadOS for that matter. So if you are used to that kind of functionality and that's part of your workflow, you're going to have to get used to not being able to do that on iPadOS. Now for this next section, you could make the argument that this is at the fault of third-party developers and manufacturers, but there is a lot of hardware in the Apple ecosystem and in the Mac ecosystem that requires software to fully optimize the experience. For instance, Logitech keyboards and Logitech mice and a bunch of other peripherals to fully customize all the shortcuts and the buttons and the usability and kind of the travel speed and being able to create customizations on that part requires some sort of Mac-specific application, and the iPad still lacks that. So for instance, if you get a new MX Master mouse and you want to customize all the buttons, you really don't have that customization with an iPad no matter how much you try, because the full customizing app is built for macOS. So if you want to get the full kind of value out of those hardware products and peripherals, going the Mac way is going to be the way to go, albeit they still work. Like, a keyboard's still going to work as a Bluetooth keyboard on your iPad. The mouse, even that MX Master, will still work as a traditional mouse out of the box with your iPad, but if you want to fully customize it and get the full value, unfortunately the iPad will not be able to give you that to a certain extent. And in that same light with kind of plugins and customization, Apple did add that new file menu bar on the top of it, albeit it's still a little bit watered down compared to what you get on Mac, but it's still a great addition. But you are not able to add third-party plugins. For instance, I use Clean My Mac, I use a diagnostic tool, I use a bunch of other tools on my Mac Mini to kind of test different things out, and on that top right-hand corner, that part is non-existent. So you cannot add, at least for now, Apple's not allowing you to add maybe customization tools or plugins or diagnostic tools or shortcut tools that you can add to the taskbar or toolbar. Let me know in the comments down below what you call that. I'm not 100% sure. Or the menu bar. Nothing can really be added from a third-party perspective. You just have your traditional settings. It's definitely a step forward for iPad, but still not fully there compared to macOS. Now, I for one am not a developer, so I had to do a little bit of extra research, and please enlighten me in the comments down below if I'm incorrect, or maybe if there's a little bit more light to be shed on this, but iPads are still lacking a good amount of developer tools. For example, there's still no real coding tools. Like Macs do have Xcode and Terminal and other tools for building apps and websites. iPad, they just can't really run that right now. And then also in that same light, when it comes to running automated scripts, outside of the shortcuts application, iPads can't really do that. So if you have some time-based scripts that are used in terminal or command line, that's only going to be able to be used in Mac. Again, this is a small subset of users. Not a lot of people are kind of this intertwined with the command line and terminal, but I know for the people that are, this is very important and something that's a big deal breaker with the iPad. And then some other miscellaneous things that I've noticed while using iPadOS over the years and now on the iPadOS 26. When it comes to audio control, it does look a little bit better and a little bit more nuanced on iPadOS 26 in terms of audio output and also mic audio input, but we're still limited to only one audio source at a time. So for instance, if you're playing an Apple Music song in the background and you open up YouTube and you play that YouTube video, the Apple Music will actually pause the music to then let the audio from that YouTube video play. So you cannot have two audio sources or more running at the same time. You're limited to one running at one time. There's also no guest mode or kid account. Like I would love to be able to, without having to use something like a guided access or an accessibility feature, give the iPad to my child or to my wife to let them have their own profile or a guest mode or a kid account. Again, that goes back to the multi-profile uses that macOS has, but iPadOS does not have a guest mode or a kid mode. And then also, I've done some testing on external display support with the iPad, and while albeit it is great and it's pretty nuanced and it works relatively well, when it comes to gaming, which I think is a big miss, I've tested 10 different games out, and not a single one of them is able to go full screen on that secondary display. They'll go full screen on the iPad display, but if you try to pull up an NBA 2K or a Fortnite or a Call of Duty, games that would work well on a full extended monitor with taking up that entire display, it stays in that 4:3 aspect ratio that the iPad Pro has. You can make it as big as you can vertically from a windowing mode, but you still have kind of like the bars of the back UI on the right and left hand side. And then the last small one that I wanted to bring up is going to be Wi-Fi and network diagnostic tools. That's all built into the macOS ecosystem and it's been there for years. iPad still does not have it. So if something is not working, if you're not able to connect to your Wi-Fi, you can't really diagnose it aside from just restarting your Wi-Fi router or your network router and then hoping for the best, because you cannot diagnose or help diagnose with what iPadOS has built in. So again, this video isn't to bash on the iPad because again, iPad is my favorite computer of all time. I've built my career online using the iPad. I use my iPad to edit these videos, to make the thumbnails, to research these videos and see, of course, what can and cannot be done. But I do have a baseline Mac Mini for testing purposes and for videos like this one, and there's still a decent amount left that iPads cannot do versus what Macs do. For a lot of people, and for more people now with iPadOS 26, I think the iPad is going to be a great computer for a lot of people. But again, it's still a tough argument when you go iPad Pro versus MacBook Air, because iPad Pro is much more expensive than a MacBook Air. MacBook Air gives you a lot more flexibility, it's a lot more legacy, meaning a lot of the things that have worked will continue to work, versus iPad is kind of living in that iPhone, iOS, iPadOS world, which is very limited, you know, depending on who you ask, to the App Store built in there and what those developers are developing for from an iPadOS perspective, because most iPad apps, well, albeit there are a good amount of iPad apps that work well on the iPad, specifically for the iPad, a lot of them are just blown up iOS apps, and you're still dealing with those limitations of iOS versus macOS. But let me know in the comment down below what you think. Are these differences deal breakers for you? I'm sure there's a bunch of other ones. List them down below. I'm very curious to see what you guys think. If you are a hardcore Mac user, why can't you use the iPad? Are there specific applications? I haven't even gotten into the application by application forefront, where an application for iPad is not the same application for macOS and vice versa. So let me know with some applications to try out down below. But if you guys made it to the end, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below. Please know that I'm still an iPad user, lover, and iPad advocate, even though I made this video. Just wanted to do this to educate people and highlight some of the differences. But if you guys want to watch more videos like this one, definitely check out one of these videos right here. And until next time, I'm Fernando. Peace, everyone.